picture this.
Hold on.
Monks, right. But instead of quiet meditation, they're getting kind of busted for attending a military parade.
Yeah, or maybe even caught up in some, like, really awkward family drama, a householder furious because a monk just won't leave his bedroom.
Exactly. These aren't scenes from some, ancient sitcom. They're actual incidents that literally shaped the rule book for one of the world's oldest monastic traditions. Welcome to the deep dive, where we take your source material and really dig in to find those hidden nuggets of insight and knowledge.
And our mission today is to explore this fascinating collection of ancient Buddhist texts. We're looking not just at the rules themselves, but the very human, sometimes messy, stories that brought them into being.
We're diving into excerpts from the Pācittiya, which is a section of the Buddhist monastic code, the Vinaya.
Right. And think of these less as dusty old regulations and more like historical case studies. They show us a lot about ethical conduct, community building.
And how a spiritual community navigated the sometimes scandalous realities of everyday life back then.
Yeah.
So we'll explore how these rules actually came about, the specific situations that prompted them, and the, frankly, surprising details about what was okay and what wasn't.
And you'll find that maintaining a spiritual path often involved navigating very practical, sometimes quite awkward everyday challenges.
Okay, let's dive in. So let's start with a place you might not expect monks to be hanging out. The military. Seems like an odd mix, right?
It really does. But in one of these texts, Pācittiya, we find this group called the Group of Six Monks, the Vagga. They were repeatedly found watching military activities.
Watching what exactly? Like just parades?
Oh, everything. Skirmishes, what they call troop formations, battle arrays, even full army reviews. They were really making a habit of it.
Wow. And what's really striking, you mentioned, isn't just that they were watching, but there were consequences.
Big time. I mean, one monk actually got hit by an arrow.
No way.
Yeah. And people openly mocked them, saying things like, oh, did you fight well? How many did you hit? It really highlights how crucial public perception was.
Right. The lay people were basically saying, hey, we go watch this stuff for our livelihood maybe, but you're monks. What are you doing here?
Precisely. It looked bad.
Yeah.
It undermined their image as renunciants focused on spiritual practice.
Okay, so that definitely sounds like a PR problem for the early sangha. What rule came out of this specific incident?
Well, this led directly to a Pācittiya rule. Basically, if a monk was staying with the army, maybe visiting someone, which we'll get to for 2 or 3 nights, and he went off to observe these military displays, that was an offense requiring confession.
Okay.
And the texts get incredibly specific about what counted as a military display. You mentioned parades, but they list things like uyodhika, a skirmish or mock fight, and balaga, a formal troop formation, even specifying like the minimum number of elephants, horses, and chariots to qualify.
That's specific.
Wow. Then there was Sanebia, a battle array, and Anikadasana, a full army review. The level of detail is fascinating. It shows they weren't messing around.
It really does. And they even distinguish between, like, just happening to see it versus intentionally going and standing there to watch.
Exactly. There's a nuance. Just sort of going to see might be a lesser offense, a dukkha, but standing and seeing, or get this, repeatedly going back to see after leaving the viewing range, that was the full Pācittiya offense.
So persistence made it worse.
Right. Intent and persistence.
Okay, but the stories don't stop there, do they? There's another incident with these same Chamokya monks.
Yeah, Pācittiya exeath. These guys again. This time, they went specifically to see King Pācittiya of Kosala's arrayed army, which had marched out.
And the king saw them.
He did. And you can just imagine the scene. He directly confronts them, asking, what brings you here?
What did they say?
They said they wanted to see him.
Oh, smooth.
Not smooth enough. The king apparently retorted, what's the use of seeing me, a warlike man? Shouldn't you rather go see the Buddha?
Ouch, royal put down.
A polite but firm one? Yeah. And again, the public complained. It reinforced this idea that it was just improper for monks to be gawking at military stuff.
So another rule.
Another Pācittiya rule, specifically against going to see an arrayed army. But then, just as things seem clear-cut.
An exception? Rules always seem to have exceptions, don't they? Especially practical ones.
They really do, and this is where the system shows its flexibility. A crucial situation arose. A monk had a sick uncle serving in the army who needed his help.
Ah, okay. A family obligation.
Exactly. A genuine need. And this specific case led to an allowance. Monks could go to the army, but only for a valid reason, what the text calls a tatharupakaya, not just for sightseeing.
So it shifts from a blanket ban to something more nuanced. It's not just what you do, but why you're doing it.
Precisely. Intent becomes key again.
But even with a valid reason, there were still limits, right? Another Pācittiya text, XLIX, suggests they couldn't just hang around indefinitely.
That's right. Even with a good reason, monks were apparently causing complaints by staying too long, atirekatirata, which means more than 2 or 3 nights.
And the lay people noticed this too.
They did. They started murmuring that the monks seemed to be staying in the army, almost like it was their job, for livelihood, not just for a brief necessary visit, which again undermined the whole idea of being a renunciant.
So the rule became,
A monk with a valid reason to go to the army could stay 2 or 3 nights. But staying longer, specifically being there on the 4th day after sunset, that incurred a Pācittiya.
very precise timing. But what about genuine emergencies?
Ah, yes, the practical wisdom kicks in again. There were important exceptions. If the monk himself got sick while there, or if he was attending to someone else who was sick, or if he was somehow hindered from leaving, maybe blocked by enemy forces or just general danger, those situations allowed for longer stays.
Okay, that makes sense. It covers the practical realities. So what's the big takeaway from all these military-related rules?
Well, it's a fascinating window, isn't it? It shows how early Buddhist discipline wasn't just about abstract spiritual goals. It was deeply concerned with maintaining focus, avoiding worldly distractions, and maybe most importantly, managing public perception. Keeping that respectable image was vital for the sangha's survival and support.
It's almost like ancient community relations or brand management.
You could definitely see it that way.
Yeah.
Drawing a clear line between the monastic life and worldly affairs, like war, was absolutely critical.
Okay, moving on from military parades and armies, let's talk about monks interacting with lay people in their homes. Bedrooms and dinner parties, perhaps.
Indeed. And here we often meet a particular monk, Venerable Upananda Sakiputta. He seems to have been, shall we say, a frequent catalyst for new rules.
The rule maker by example type.
Something like that. So Pācittiya Exeg 3 gives us quite the domestic scene. Upananda goes to a supporter's house and sits down in the sainaher, which basically means the bedroom alone with the householder's wife.
Okay, yeah, I can already see where this might be going. The householder walks in.
Exactly. The householder comes home, asks his wife to give Upananda some alms, standard procedure. But then he repeatedly tells Upananda to leave.
And Upananda doesn't.
He doesn't. And then, to make things even more awkward, the wife, apparently sensing her husband's anger, tells Upananda to stay.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Extremely awkward. So the householder, understandably, goes off to complain bitterly about this monk hanging out in his bedroom and refusing to leave when asked.
I bet. So what rule came out of this particular drama?
A Pācittiya fence was established. It was for a monk to, anupakaja nisaja kapeya, basically, to enter and sit down alone with a woman in what's called a sabajana kula.
Which means?
It's defined quite carefully. A house where food is being prepared, specifically where both a man and a woman are usually present, neither has left permanently, and crucially, both are assumed not to be free from lust. So a typical household.
Right. And you mentioned it even got specific about where in the house.
Incredibly specific. The severity, or maybe just the definition of in the room, depended on the house size. In a large house, it was sitting beyond arm's reach of the door. In a small house, it was sitting beyond the main beam.
That is meticulous. It's really about creating clear boundaries and avoiding even the appearance of anything improper, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about protecting both the monk's reputation and the layperson's peace of mind.
Were there exceptions here, too? It seems unlikely a monk could never be alone with a woman under any circumstances.
Correct. There were exceptions. It wasn't an offense if another monk was present, or if the couple in the house were considered free from lust, perhaps very elderly or spiritually advanced, or importantly, if it wasn't actually in the bedroom.
Okay, so context matters again. It shows a nuanced approach to a really sensitive area.
Definitely. It highlights that delicate balance of trust between the monastic community and its lay supporters. Even the perception of impropriety could be damaging.
So that covers being in a room together. What about situations where privacy wasn't just in a bedroom, but maybe, deliberately sought out elsewhere?
Right. And guess who provides the next case study?
Let me guess, Upananda.
You got it. Pācittiya XL 540. This time, he sat with a woman in a Rahu Pachana Asane.
Meaning?
A private, concealed place, hidden from view. And again, the householder complained about this secret meeting.
I can only imagine the gossip these incidents must have generated. These rules seem to define privacy in almost forensic detail.
They really do. Raho, meaning private, is defined as both out of sight so meticulously that it says you can't see them even by narrowing your eyes or craning your neck, and out of hearing, meaning normal conversation can't be overheard. And
Wow.
Asana means a concealed seat hidden by a wall, a door, a screen, a tree, a pillar, anything that blocks the view.
Mm.
The offense is sitting or lying down together in such a spot.
But surely there were times a monk might need to speak privately. Were there allowances?
Yes, again, practical exceptions. It wasn't an offense if there was a discerning male witness present, someone trustworthy who could vouch for propriety,
Okay.
or if they were standing instead of sitting or lying down, or if they weren't actually seeking privacy, it just happened to be a quiet spot, or if the monk was sitting there but was clearly distracted or focused on something else, not the conversation.
And then there's another related rule, Pācittiya XLV. Does that add anything?
It broadens the scope slightly. It focuses on sitting iko ekaya raho, one man alone with one woman in a private place, raho, without necessarily requiring that the place be physically concealed, vaichana. So it tightens the restriction on being alone together in any secluded spot, even if not actively hidden.
It feels like they're really trying to cover all the bases here.
Absolutely. What's truly fascinating about this set of rules is how focused they are not just on preventing actual misconduct, but meticulously preventing even the appearance of anything wrong.
Right. It shows such a deep awareness of public perception and how fragile that trust between the monks and their supporters could be.
Exactly. It's as much about maintaining reputation and community harmony as it is about the individual monk's behavior.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Our journey into these monastic rules continues with how monks handled resources and offerings. This must have been a critical area, especially for a community relying entirely on donations.
Hugely important. Ethical conduct around resources was key. Pācittiya XLI gives us a good starting point, dealing with giving food to other ascetics, those outside the Buddhist order.
Giving food away. How did that cause a problem?
Well, a couple of instances are mentioned. First, Venerable Ananda, usually seen as very wise, made a mistake in Vasali. He apparently gave 2 cakes twice to one particular female wanderer from another sect.
Okay,
So the other wanderers from her group started gossiping, accusing her of having a lover monk who was giving her special treats.
okay. Misinterpretation and gossip.
Exactly. In another case, a different monk gave a large portion of really good food rice, mixed with ghee, to an Acelakavaggo ascetic. When people asked the Acelakavaggo where he got such fine food, he apparently said something like, "Oh, from one of those bald-headed Gautama's monks."
Oh.
Yeah. The lay Buddhist followers heard this and were not happy. They complained that these other sectarians would use the monks' generosity to basically mock or defame the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha.
So it backfired. It looked like the monks were maybe favoring other groups or their gifts were being used inappropriately?
Precisely. So the rule became a Pācittiya offense for a monk to give edible food, pajaniya, staple food, or hard food, by his own hand to an unordained wanderer. They list specific types like echalakas, parapachakas, peripachikas.
By his own hand. So were there ways around it?
Yes, the exceptions are key here. It wasn't an offense if the monk ordered someone else to give the food, or if he just placed it down for them to take, or if what he was giving was something like an external medicine or ointment.
So it's about avoiding that direct personal giving that could be misconstrued or lead to problematic associations.
Exactly. Maintaining boundaries between the communities.
Okay, and speaking of food, let's bring back our friend Venerable Upananda. Pācittiya XLZI deals with eating etiquette and hospitality. Sounds like he caused trouble there too.
He did indeed. This rule tackles the issue of visiting other families for food when you've already been invited for a meal somewhere else.
Like double booking for dinner.
Sort of, but with community consequences. Upananda apparently made a habit of visiting other families before going to his invited meal. The problem was, the monks at the host place would wait for him, get delayed, and maybe couldn't eat comfortably because they were waiting.
Okay, inconsiderate.
Then he also did it after an invited meal. He'd go visit other families, presumably for more food or socializing, and this caused food to spoil back at the monastery or wherever, because again, people were waiting for him or saving portions.
Right, so his actions were directly impacting the group's resources and schedule.
Absolutely. It was seen as greedy or just plain disruptive. So the Buddha initially laid down a rule against visiting other families before an invited meal, and then later extended it to visiting after the meal as well.
But surely monks needed to collect things sometimes. Weren't there exceptions for practical needs?
Yes, very important ones. The rule didn't apply during the Kavaradhanasamayo, which is the robe-giving season after the rains retreat, and the Kavarakarasamyo, the robe-making season. Monks needed to visit lay supporters, then to receive cloth and supplies.
That makes sense. What about illness?
Also covered. A sick monk could visit other families, even if invited elsewhere, but he first had to Santa Bikuda Pucha, basically, ask permission from another monk who was present. Accountability again.
These rules really paint a picture of a community trying to balance individual needs with group harmony and, well, basic politeness.
Very much so. And that theme continues with resources in Pācittiya Kala 7, which is about soliciting medicine.
Medicine. How did that become an issue?
This story involves a very generous lay supporter, Mahanama Saka. He offered to provide medicine for the entire sangha, initially for 4 months. Then he extended it for another 4 months, and then he made it a permanent lifetime offering.
Wow, an incredible act of generosity. So what was the problem?
The problem, perhaps predictably, came from the Chabagya monks again.
Those guys.
Yep. Apparently, Mahanama had criticized their scruffy appearance at some point. So out of resentment, they deliberately tried to annoy him. They went and demanded a specific large measure, a dacha of ghee, which was considered a medicine.
Just to be difficult.
Seems like it. They kept pressing him for it, even when he explained it wasn't ready or available just then. They were abusing his generosity out of spite.
That's pretty low. So the rule?
The rule became, a monk who isn't sick can accept an invitation for medicine for a specific period, like the initial 4 months Mahanama offered. But he should not ask for more than that period allows, unless the supporter explicitly re-invites him or makes it a permanent invitation.
And if it is a permanent invitation?
Then a monk can only actually request or accept the medicine from that permanent offer when he is sick. And asking for more than offered, or asking for medicine for a different purpose than the supporter intended, that became a Pācittiya.
So it's really about respecting the terms of the offer and not being greedy or demanding.
Precisely. And the text even clarifies different types of invitations. Some might specify the amount of medicine, some the number of nights it covers, some neither. The rules adapt.
Were there any allowable reasons to ask for medicine beyond the strict invitation terms?
Yes, a few crucial ones. A monk could ask for the same type of medicine if the initial amount ran out, but the invitation period wasn't over. Or, importantly, they could ask for medicine for a valid reason outside the original scope, like for a sick family member, or for another monk's benefit, or if they were paying for it with their own resources, not relying on the supporter's specific donation.
Okay, so it prevents abuse, but still allows for genuine need and flexibility.
Exactly. Taken together, these rules about giving food, accepting meals, and receiving medicine really emphasize ethical stewardship. It's about respecting lay generosity, avoiding greed, preventing actions that cause public criticism, and making sure community resources aren't wasted or misused. Very practical stuff.
Very practical indeed. Finally, let's look briefly at rules designed to foster harmony within the monastic community itself, between monks. Because, well, living together isn't always easy, is it?
Definitely not, even in a monastery. And Pācittiya Excerpts gives us a clear example, starring, yet again, Venerable Upananda.
He really gets around in these rule origin stories. What did he do this time?
This time, he invited another monk to go on alms round with him. They set off together, but then partway, Upananda basically says, Uyojaya. He sends the other monk away.
Just dismisses him. Why?
His stated reason was pretty blunt. Go away, friend. Conversation or sitting with you isn't comfortable for me. I prefer to be alone.
Wow. That's harsh and probably quite hurtful.
And impractical. The direct consequence was that the monk who got sent away was left stranded, potentially without enough time or opportunity to collect sufficient food for his meal that day.
Ah, so it wasn't just rude, it potentially harmed the other monk's basic needs.
Exactly. So the rule made it a Pācittiya offense to send another monk away if it was done solely for that selfish reason, wanting solitude, or maybe wanting to engage in some activity alone that wasn't appropriate.
If it was done for that reason, that implies there might be legitimate reasons to separate.
Correct. And this is crucial for understanding the rule's intent. It wasn't about forcing monks to always stick together. The rule explicitly provides exceptions for valid reasons to separate.
Such as?
Well, for instance, if the group going for alms was simply too large for a particular area, or if one monk feared that the other monk might develop greed if they saw expensive goods in a certain house they were passing.
Interesting. Like protecting the other monk from temptation.
Kind of. Or Similarly, if one feared the other might become upset or displeased if they encountered women on the path. Or, a very practical one, if one monk was sent off specifically to bring back food for someone who was sick.
Okay, so those are all about the well-being of the community or individuals within it, not just selfish preference.
Precisely. The rule isn't against separating, it's against selfishly dismissing someone in a way that negatively impacts them or demonstrates a lack of care for the community dynamic.
This really underscores the Sangha's emphasis on, mutual support and accountability, doesn't it?
Mm.
Discouraging behavior that harms a fellow monastic's well-being or their ability to just get through the day.
It absolutely does. It's about fostering that sense of collective responsibility.
Well, we've certainly had a deep dive into these ancient Pācittiya rules today. It's been fascinating seeing how they dealt with everything from monks watching the army.
Right, to navigating that really delicate dance with lay communities, especially around issues of privacy and propriety.
And then the ethical handling of offerings, food, medicine, respecting generosity.
And finally, fostering basic harmony and consideration within the monastic order itself, preventing monks from, ditching each other mid-alms round.
It shows these aren't just obscure historical footnotes, are they? They feel like powerful insights into human behavior, the real challenges of living in any community, and that constant effort required to live a disciplined, ethical life.
Definitely. And what's striking is the system itself, how it balances these often quite strict guidelines with very practical exceptions, clearly born from real-world situations and, according to tradition, the wisdom of the Buddha adapting to circumstances.
So as you, listening, reflect on these rules, maybe consider how these dilemmas from centuries ago, dilemmas about reputation, managing resources, personal boundaries, community support, how they still resonate today, perhaps even in your own life or communities you're part of.
It's a great point. What timeless wisdom can we maybe extract from these incredibly meticulous ancient regulations about how you actually build and maintain a thriving ethical community? Something to think about.